everybody, and welcome to the Act Love podcast. I'm Alyssa, joined with my mom, Heidi. And today we have Jerianne, who is a birth mother and an author, and she is kind enough to come on here and kind of share her story with us today.
Yes,
Hi.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Okay, so like I explained it, if you just want to tell us your story,
Okay.
your
Well,
introduction stuff.
I was already a single mom with three sons. I was not a kid. Typically you think of birth moms as being young, but there are actually birth mothers out there I was 28 at the time. And so there are birth
Yeah,
moms out there who are older. No one is
there are.
no one is exempt from making bad choices. So hopefully we learn as we get older. Some of us are late bloomers. That's what I definitely
Yeah,
am. I'm now
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
67. Um,
Mm,
but at the time, I had moved into the projects. I had applied for college. I was getting my degree in social work. And I had not yet started. In fact, I was supposed to start, and I did start the spring semester in January, which ironically was when my birth son was born. He was actually born yesterday, 37
Oh,
years
wow.
ago, yesterday,
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
wow.
the 28th.
That's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was actually due 2 weeks before, or no, I'm sorry, 2 weeks later, but he was born 2 weeks earlier. So,
Oh,
um, I got involved in a relationship that I don't know how much time we have, so
oh,
I don't want to
we have
drag
an
this.
hour. So, yeah,
Okay,
we
I'll
have
make
an
it.
hour. So you can,
Okay, I'll make it condensed. But the thing of it
yeah,
is,
okay.
um, I was getting ready to go into school. I moved into the projects because I was going to be a full-time student. I wasn't planning on working because I wanted to spend more time with my kids. I couldn't see myself holding a full-time job and going to school and trying to study. I actually ended up having to put a hold on my admission because I was going to start in the fall prior because I found out I was pregnant. And so, the idea of adoption was not foreign to me because my sister had placed about 13 years prior when she was in high school. And so I knew a little bit about it, but I wasn't really
Mm,
thinking about it, at that time. A friend of mine, somehow through the pipeline and the community, she found out, she called me up and she says, "What are you going to do? You're getting ready to go to school and you got three kids and blah, blah,
yeah.
blah." She went through the whole,
You're like, I already
reminding me
know
of
that.
my life.
I'm yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
was gonna say. That's what I was gonna
Yeah.
say.
And she says,
Thank
"What are
you
you
for
going to do?" And
reminding me of that.
she was somebody that I highly respected. She was very active in the community, and I don't know how she got word of it, but I told her, I said, "I don't know what I'm going to do." I hadn't really at that point given it a lot of thought. I was angry at myself, and uh I was a Christian at that time, but I was also very low self-esteem, just still looking for love in all the wrong places, and got
Yeah.
involved with this
Mm-hmm.
guy, and the next thing I knew I was pregnant. So, but it was interesting because she had received a letter. She goes, "I have a letter here sitting on my desk. It's an autobiography of a couple that want to adopt." And there was a picture of them. And she said, "My sister, who is good friends with the prospective adoptive mother at the time, uh, sent it to my friend Kathy, just,
Okay.
put out some
Yeah.
feelers and see if there's
Yeah.
anything catching
Yeah.
out there." She says, "So I don't know what it
Yeah.
means, but would you be willing to look at this?" And I said, "Sure."
Yeah.
And so she sent it to me, and this is 1987. Okay. So there was no
Okay.
internet, there
Yeah.
was no cell phones. So
No.
she mailed it
No
to me.
Facebook.
No Facebook, no social media whatsoever. So in the meantime, I was thinking of talking to my pastor. I thought I need to do something, and so I asked God to speak through my pastor. And so I called him up and I
Yeah.
told him everything, and then it was so funny. It almost was like slow motion. He says, "I think that's a wonderful idea." And I said, "You do?" And he said, "Yeah, absolutely." He said the same thing. "You got 3 kids, you're getting ready to go to college." But, the reason that my main reason for wanting to pursue adoption was because I could have gotten an increase in WIC and food stamps and probably gotten a larger apartment, and all these things
Yeah.
because I had an extra mouth to feed, but I did not want the birth father in our lives. Uh,
Yeah.
I I didn't feel safe, and I didn't want that for my son or my other 3 sons. So,
Yeah.
it just felt, that it was the right thing to do. And so,
Yeah.
I got the letter, I liked what I saw. I didn't have to go through a process as a lot of birth moms do in
Yeah.
looking at profiles and stuff like that. I just felt at peace about my decision and selected them. And then we started, a friend of mine connected me to uh, an agency in town. I lived in El Paso at the time. And
Okay.
so I started, going through the process very early on. I think at this point I was probably 4 or 5 months pregnant. And, before we even got connected with the social worker, I already had this couple's phone number, address. We wanted to have an open adoption.
Oh, wow.
No, so
And
so
they
you
even
were
wanted
doing
me
an
to
open
move.
adoption.
Pardon
Oh,
me?
really?
Wow.
They
I
wanted me to
said you were
move to
doing
Colorado. Yeah, they
yeah.
me
You
and
were
my
doing an
children.
open adoption before open was even a thing,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
right? Yeah.
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 It was.
That's
Uh,
that's that's
And
amazing.
so I had their phone number and address, and we just communicated quite a bit, called each other up. There was one point when I froze and I got really scared about what I was doing,
Yeah.
and I changed my mind. And it was really a 24-hour process, and it really shocked them, because they were believing this was going to be their child, and
Yeah.
they told me later that they felt that the child had died, and so they were really mourning
Oh,
over the loss of
yeah.
that. And I really had to change my attitude about, I wanted to be focused on this child for them. This was a child I
Yeah.
was carrying. Yes, biologically it was my child, but I needed to change, I needed to shift my attitude towards, you know, being excited for the couple. Like, we would call each other up when I got my ultrasound done, and they wanted to
Oh,
know, how big is he, what, circumference. I mean, they wanted to know
yeah.
everything that they could possibly know. And then they told me about how they were getting the baby's room ready, and they were going to have a baby shower at some point. And so we would share, what was happening
Yeah.
for each of us in the
Yeah.
process. And then they came down in November and ironically stayed in a hotel that was right across the street from where I lived. And I wasn't
Oh,
supposed to see them. I wasn't
oh,
supposed to see
really?
them without the social worker there. But
Oh,
I
okay.
I took the kids to school that morning. I went to the lobby. Big no-no. But anyway, they were so excited to see me, and then I called my social worker and she said, "Don't you do anything until I get there." Well, we'd already met. I mean, we'd already
Yeah.
been forming this relationship,
Well, yeah,
So,
you were before you even had them come down.
yeah,
You were talking to
before,
them. You already had a
exactly.
relationship with them prior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we did end up
And
going
so
to
what was the
lunch.
social worker? Okay.
What was her what?
Oh, I was just wondering what the concern of the social worker was, why she didn't want you to meet with them.
That's a good
You
question.
don't know. Okay.
I do not know the answer, but I think
Yeah.
it had to be done her way. And, there were things that
Yeah, okay.
uh, I guess she wanted to facilitate, but we were just so comfortable with
Okay.
each other.
Yeah.
It was fine. I mean, it turned out
Yeah.
fine anyway, but I don't think she was real happy about that. But all right. Anyway, so we did go to lunch, and then finally when it was time for, and I do have to say, in the midst of all this, the birth father was just not cooperative. He kept threatening me. He kept
Mm,
saying he wasn't going to sign papers, and I'm going to get an attorney, blah blah
Yeah.
blah. But we just kept moving forward, because my
Mhm.
last resort would be for me to parent my son because I did not want to sign
Yeah.
papers until he did. So,
Yeah.
that was my decision all along. But it worked out beautifully. I mean, I had him, he was 11 pounds, 12 and a half ounces. He was
Oh,
like a
wow.
3-month-old
That
baby.
That's
In
a
fact, they
big
called
I
him
baby.
can't
Big,
even
they called him Bigfoot at the hospital. So the couple did fly
oh my
down.
gosh.
The couple,
Crazy. I can't believe that.
and it
That is
was,
such a
I don't even want to go into the details, but it was a natural childbirth, and that's all I'm going to say about that.
Oh my
really?
goodness.
Yeah, my
Oh my
doctor didn't even
gosh.
believe that I was going to have him. And I don't know why she didn't believe me, but when I went to her office, she wanted me to come to her office instead of going to the hospital. And I had never
Yeah.
experienced with my other kids having my water break. And when I got to
Yeah.
her
Oh,
office and was getting ready to
it
be
broke.
examined, my water broke. And she's like, go to
Oh,
the hospital, go to the hospital.
Wow.
Okay, I
how big
tried
were
to
your other
tell
babies?
you. I tried to tell her. So
How
anyway,
big were your
so
other babies that you had?
pardon
Yeah.
me?
How big were your other babies?
Oh, they
Your
were
three other
all
boys?
about 7 pounds, some 5 ounces, 4.5 ounces. They were not, and Timmy, the
Nothing
one
like the
before him, was 8 pounds, so he was the largest. And then there comes Sean,
okay.
who's my birth son, and
Alexa,
his
how come
dad
he
was
was
not a big guy. I mean, 6'1", but he
That's
wasn't,
so
he
interesting.
wasn't
yeah.
a big guy. So yeah, it was very unusual, and it was
Oh my
they asked if I was a
crazy.
diabetic, and at that time I was not. So
Okay.
we don't know. But and he's not a big guy now. I've met him and seen
Yeah.
him, and he is not a big guy. He's kind of average height.
yeah.
But the thing that
Yeah.
was really cool about this story is David the birth father's name had come to the hospital, and he made a scene, and he passed out on the elevator, and we had
Oh my
police
goodness.
and security guard because I really thought he was going to take the baby. I really did. And at
Oh,
that time, the
That's
couple
terrible.
had made the choice not to see the baby until we had signed papers. Okay, so this
yes.
is
Yeah.
1988 at this time, by the time he was born.
Yeah.
So I think rules in Texas have changed a little bit, but back then you could have signed, within 24 hours. And so anyway,
We
I
can
did
do
not
that
want,
here in Utah.
pardon me? Is it Utah,
Oh,
the same?
Utah. Yeah, Utah's law is 24 hours after the birth of the baby
Well, that's
and they're
good.
relinquished.
Yeah.
Yeah, so every state's different. But
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
anyway, so David had passed out in the elevator, and there was this big scene, and everybody was exhausted. So all my support system that I had with me, everybody decided to let me rest, and they all went and had lunch. And then I got a phone call from my social worker, and she said, "I just want you to know that David's on his way over here." And I was really excited. I thought, why would he be going over there? And she says, "Well, don't get excited,"
Yeah.
because he didn't say why he's coming, but I knew why he was going. And a couple
Mm.
hours went by, and it was really quiet, and I was praying, and I got into the word, and just
Mhm.
had some peace, just wanted to get some peace
Yeah.
from everything, and then
Yeah.
just waited for her to call me back. And sure enough, 2 hours later, she called and said that
Mhm.
he had signed the papers. So, of
Oh,
course,
that's
it was so funny because everybody came back to my room after those 2 hours, and we were like holding hands and
mm.
jumping up and down. And it was like, and the couple was there with us and everything. And so they took off.
Oh,
They took
good.
off because
Yeah.
they wanted to see him. They had not seen him yet. And so the
Yeah.
nurses gave them a room where they could be alone with him and feed him and stuff.
Oh,
And
that's
so
so
while they were
cool.
gone, after about 10 minutes, I was telling my friend, I said, I really want to see them as a family. I really want to see,
Yeah.
my last picture of all of them. I wanted to, and I didn't take a picture, but it's a mental
Yeah.
picture. And so I knocked on the
Yeah.
door, and they like welcomed me in, and they were feeding him. And I was sitting in the middle of them. So mom was here, dad was here, and I was in the middle. And I'm just watching and observing how, they're just going crazy over this little guy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I told them, I said, you know what? I know I just gave birth to him, but I feel that he is your baby. He is definitely your
Yeah.
baby.
Yeah.
Because I think,
No, that's
and that
amazing.
had to do with my mindset, months before, that I decided that I'm not gonna, I mean, I don't want to say I didn't love him. I loved him because I wanted the best for him,
Yeah.
And so, but
Yeah.
I really believe that was when my mind turned. And I have to share this part too. It's a very important piece, I think, for
Mhm.
anyone struggling with forgiveness or unforgiveness. When I was in
Yeah.
about my 7th month, I really felt compelled to spend some time in the Word, and I really had not done that. I had like little fleeting prayers here and there, but I really did not spend time in the Word. And I
Yeah.
remember taking my kids to school that morning, and I didn't have class that day, so I came back and I picked up my Bible and I walked upstairs and I got to the side of my bed, and I didn't know what to say. I was very embarrassed and ashamed of what I had allowed to happen. I should have known better. I,
Yeah.
I was 28 years old and I was very involved at that time. I was a believer for about 6 years already, and I was very involved at that time with our local crisis pregnancy center. But I didn't go to anyone there to get my pregnancy test done because I was just
Yeah.
so embarrassed about it.
Embarrassed.
So I did go to an abortion clinic and I had my test done there. And and it was very cold and,
Yeah.
very
Not
women,
very
other women
personal.
sitting in the waiting room waiting. And so after I had my pregnancy test done, they wanted to make another appointment for me. And I said, no, I said, I'm done. But I
Yeah.
just, back
Yeah.
then they didn't have over the counter pregnancy tests. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
1987, they did not.
Yeah.
So
No.
it was
Different
very
time for
different,
Yeah.
very
sure.
different back then. Yeah.
Hmm.
So everything went well, and it started off as an open adoption, and but after, I was married to the father, also to the birth father, and
Oh,
the
you
plan
were.
was, yeah, I was married to him. Yeah. So you can't
Okay.
you can't get a you can't have a divorce while you're pregnant. So you have to wait for the pregnancy and then you
Oh,
can file for divorce. Well,
That's
he came
interesting.
back into my life and I let him in, foolish person that I was.
oh,
And like an idiot, I called the couple from campus. I'll never forget. I was going to UTEP in El Paso and I went to a payphone and I
mhm.
called them and I was all
Never
excited and
forget.
I thought they'd share that excitement with me, but they did not, because they saw
No.
what they saw at the hospital and it was not, it was bad for them. And
Yeah.
all of a
Hmm.
sudden Mike changed his mind with me, his attitude, and he said, if you ever need to talk to us again, call our attorney. So they did not want to talk to me
Wow.
anymore after that. So I
Yeah.
pursued, we had an agreement that by the time he was 2 years old, that I was going to being sent like little milestone updates on how the baby was progressing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
pictures and things like that. Well, those
Yeah.
first 2 years, I got nothing. But I sent the first year and the second year, all the way up until 18. Every year, I sent him a current picture of all of us together, me and my sons.
Okay.
And I wrote a little letter. Well, by the time he turned 2, though, going back, she sent me like a little write up of, cutting teeth and what age and crawling.
Okay.
And it was
Yeah.
very impersonal, I mean,
Okay.
and then she sent me a little photo album with pictures of him from bad angles, like just
Oh,
like a
oh,
bad picture.
yeah.
So I
Yeah.
still have it. I still have it and I treasure it. But I was kind of disappointed because I wanted to have better pictures of him.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. For
so
sure.
we didn't speak at all to each other. Um, I honored, every year I would send all my stuff to the agency in Colorado because they hooked up with
Hmm.
an agency there. And then, of course, I had mine in El Paso.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
always sent it to the agency, and then I'd always follow
Mm.
up and ask if anybody came and
They
picked it up. And they usually always, most times, as far as I know, they did. They picked them up. And
Yeah.
the way I know that they did pick them up is years later. I'll tell you what happened there. But
Yeah.
when he was 18, yeah, I really, really was expecting to hear from him. And I wrote him a letter and told him I'd love to come to your graduation. I'd love to come to your wedding. I was just kind of
Yeah.
throwing hints
Yeah,
out
want to
there,
be
but I never
Yes.
heard
Yeah.
from him. I never heard from him again. And so I really had to struggle with, uh, what do I do about that? I mean, I don't want to try
So,
searching for him. I
yeah.
wanted him to be able to find me if necessary.
Yeah.
But let me tell you
So,
what happened,
so
which
for,
was, pardon me? Go
okay, I
ahead.
was just going to ask really quick, for the 18 years, then they didn't send you anything except that book at the beginning.
Yep,
That's
nothing
all
else.
you had that whole
Nothing
time,
else.
even though
Well,
you
and
were sending stuff,
yeah, I was sending stuff every year, always around his birthday.
and
And
they
so I
didn't
never,
send anything.
no, never heard
Oh,
another word.
I'm sorry about
Um,
that.
well, and it's interesting because I I wrestled back and forth in my mind. I remember after 2 years, I don't remember if it was before or after, I got the pictures and stuff, but I had like a panic attack. I was driving in my car and all of a sudden I was
oh,
like,
no.
what did I do? I mean, this is 2 years later
Yes.
and I'm having this panic
Yeah.
attack. And then I had to like snap out of it because I really was very intentional in my planning of what I
Yeah.
wanted for my son. And I was happy with how things worked out. And, but so I had to just press on with my life and my three boys and do my annual, letters
Yeah.
to Sean is his name. But, you
Yeah.
know, it was a disappointment. I was in shock probably for, I don't know. I was numb to the fact that
For
they didn't
sure.
want to hear from me
Yeah.
anymore. When we
Yeah,
had hit it off
hard.
so
Yeah.
Not
great,
good.
and I
Just-
was emotionally immature. I was really emotionally immature.
Yeah. So
Um,
what, I know you told us before, but how old were you? How long after his birth did you call them and tell them about you getting back together with the birth father?
well, he was born in January, and David showed
Uh-huh.
up at my house with flowers on Valentine's Day. So it was a month.
Oh,
It was a month
not
later,
very long at
just a
all.
month. Okay.
and they were still like adjusting, and then I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
guess what?
So do you feel like if that wouldn't have taken place, that they would have stayed in contact with you?
well, probably not, because I found out, and it was confirmed years later. By the time Sean was 8 years old, this couple had divorced. His mom and dad
Okay.
had
Oh,
divorced, which made
Okay.
me even more devastated. That
Upset.
I
Yeah.
was so angry because that's not what I wanted for him. And I knew, I
Yeah.
sat down and wrote this great big long letter. And I thought, before I mailed it, I was thinking, what good is this really doing? I mean, it was good to get it
Yeah.
off my chest, but it's not going to cause
Yes.
them to get back together. And I
No. Yeah.
knew that they would still love him regardless. They
Yeah.
just wouldn't be
Yeah.
together as mother and father, as a family.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So that was another
Yeah.
hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
So what happened in 2009, I believe it was, Facebook was already around, the internet and everything. My youngest son, who was actually Sean's older brother, but at the time he was my
Yeah.
younger son,
Yeah.
Tim, he lived in Washington State. He searched for Sean on his own, did some
Okay.
little searching on
oh,
Facebook,
wow.
and he found him. And they ended
Oh, he
up,
did.
Tim flew to Colorado
That's
and they had a
Oh,
meeting.
that's great.
Yeah, so
Oh,
this is
That's
2009,
awesome.
okay? So
yeah.
Tim was kind of disappointed. I guess, you get your hopes up or your expectations.
You build it up to
Um,
be something different. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and first Sean stood him up. He didn't meet him where he said he was going to meet him. So I think that was part
Oh,
of his. He was young. He was like 20, I don't know, 21, 20 or 21 at that time. So
Okay.
anyway, Tim finally did meet him and he said, "Well, Mom, I just want you to know that he's not like us." Totally
wow.
opposite of us,
Uh-huh.
conservative Christian family, and Sean was not like that. Although his
Oh,
parents
okay.
professed to be Christians when they adopted him, but they went to an
Okay.
Episcopalian church and yeah. But then again, later they got divorced. So Sean's life
Yeah.
was not what. And to throw
Yeah.
another wrench in there, come to find out later, my middle son actually lives 5 minutes away from Sean. So they
Oh
get
my
together quite
gosh.
a bit. They get
That's
together all the
crazy.
Oh,
time.
that's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
And my grandkids call him Uncle Sean. And I've had conversations
Oh,
with my
that's awesome.
granddaughters about, why do you think that is? How did your dad explain?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. That
dad just,
situation.
yeah, I mean, you're calling him Uncle Sean but anyway. So
Yeah.
then my oldest son, he took a special trip to go see Sean. So eventually all
Mhm.
three of them have met one another and they're
And
friends on Facebook, but Sean blocked me. He did not want me to be his friend on
oh,
Facebook. And so
that's crazy.
I accepted that. I accepted that.
Yeah.
And about that
Yeah.
time that Tim saw Sean, 2009, I created a group on Facebook called Seasoned Birth Moms. And it
Okay.
was only for
Mhm.
women who had placed 18 years or more. I did not want
Okay.
young, fresh birth moms on there because their
Yeah.
agenda would be different than those of us who have
Yes.
placed. I have over 300 women on that page right now. And
Okay.
it's incredible.
Oh,
Some of them placed when they were back in the 50s when they didn't have what they have today. It
Yeah.
was nothing but
Yeah.
closed adoptions, and a lot of them stayed in
Okay.
maternity homes, and they didn't even know the gender of their child.
Yeah.
They couldn't
Yeah.
even select their child. So it's really
Yes.
been interesting to have that page, and I have so many women who
Mhm.
have told me that I'm glad that you're here, because
Yeah.
they're able to talk to one, and if they have good things to share, they'll share pictures. If they have
Yeah.
questions, they'll throw those questions out there. Some of them have had reunions and they have not been good reunions, and a lot of times we do talk about expectations. It's like
Yeah.
I
mhm.
had zero expectations, and
Yes.
I had zero. And when I met my son, it was a
Yeah.
year and a half ago, and
Oh,
my middle son Jason invited us to our granddaughter's graduation, and he goes, "Mom, I
okay.
just want to prepare you that Sean's going to be there." And I said, "Oh,
Mhm.
really?
Mm.
Great." I didn't really know how to respond. And he goes, and he
Yeah.
said, and then throughout the time between then and finally the graduation, I heard different back and forth stories about, oh, he's coming. No, he's not coming. And I
Uh,
said, you know what, Jason?
Mhm.
I said, I'm there to see Caitlin graduate from high school. I
yeah.
am
I
not
don't care.
there
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
see Sean. I mean, if he shows up, great.
Yeah.
If he doesn't, I'm okay with
Yeah.
that.
It's
So
yeah.
on the actual day of her graduation, he did not show up. And I was like, okay,
Okay.
whatever. I was not getting my hopes up, really. Well, later on
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
day, there's a knock on the door. My son, Jason, rented a Airbnb for 14 people, for 14 of us to stay at.
Oh, okay.
So it was
Yeah.
myself, my husband, my sons, their wives, and my daughter-in-law's parents and her brother. So there was
Okay.
14 of us in the house. And it was
Yeah.
so funny because we'd already barbecued, and we had some company come and go, and so everybody was kind of relaxing. And then Sabrina's parents and brother, they went out. So the only ones left in the house was my kids and their wives and my husband. And
Yeah.
then Sean
Okay.
knocks on the door.
It
And
was
Wow.
everybody
actually really good
knew,
timing.
yeah, everybody knew he was coming except me, of course. Nobody shared that with
Oh.
me. And he walks in the door and I hear his voice. And I've heard his voice
Mhm.
before on recordings and stuff.
Okay.
And I also recognize his face. But when he walked in the front door, he's hugging everybody. And then I'm standing there and I said, "Do I get a hug?" And he says, "Of course."
Yeah.
And so it was a true,
Mm-mm.
I mean, I wish somebody had videoed it, but nobody did because we were
Yeah.
all crying. And it was just so
No.
touching, and it was everything I'd hoped it would be.
Oh,
He
good.
I didn't want to hug too hard, and I tried to pull away, and he just kept hugging, and then
Hugging.
he
No,
whispered in
that's
my ear and said, "It's time." And this was a year and a half ago, so he just turned 37 yesterday, so he was 35
Okay.
at that time. So
Okay.
since then, I've been real careful. I let him initiate stuff. I do not. I wished him a happy birthday yesterday. I sent him a text, and so those kind of things I'll do. But
Yeah.
I let him ask the questions. He's asked
Yeah.
about, his birth father. He's asked about, like, I've had numerous losses in the last couple of years in my family, and my dad and mom, my brother, and he would ask, how is that person related to me? Because he
Yeah.
sees it on Facebook now since we're friends on Facebook.
Yes.
He'll
Okay.
say,
You're
he'll send
friends
me
now on Facebook. Good.
yes, we are friends. After that meeting, I asked him, I said, could we be friends on Facebook? And he said, of course. So, but it's really, it's interesting, and it's so funny because after he left, we all sat down at the table after he came in, and there was a lot of questions about his birth, and of course, Bigfoot and all that stuff, and he asked about his heritage, and it was
Yeah.
all of my sons. We're all sitting around the table in
Mhm.
the kitchen, and the wives, and my husband,
Yeah.
and it was really cool. But after he left, my daughters-in-law are saying, now, don't do too much. Let him take the initiative, blah, blah, blah. Okay. I worked 24 years in adoption. I was an adoption social worker.
Yeah.
I also did post
Oh, you
adoption
were. Oh,
searches.
Yeah.
And so it's so funny to hear them
okay.
telling me this stuff because I'm like, yeah, I know, I
Me.
know. So it's really been an
You're like, you don't
interesting
have to
journey.
tell me. I know.
Yeah, you don't have to tell me, I know. But I
Yeah.
listened to them and, and it was just really such a joy to have them all there for that experience, It was
Yeah.
totally unplanned. I mean,
Imagine.
what happened on that day is that he was closing on a house, him and his fiance. They had just bought a house and it took longer than they thought, so he came over right after. Well, now since
After.
then, they got married, probably a couple of months after that, and now they're expecting a baby. So it's really interesting because altogether, between my husband and I, we have 15 grandchildren, including the one in the womb.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
we have grandchildren in
That's a
Washington
good amount.
State, Colorado, Fort Worth, Texas. So yeah, it's been a
All
good,
over the
been
place.
a
That's
yeah.
great.
And they can't come here. We've had some once in a while come and visit, but it's tough, when you've got a bunch of
Yeah.
kids and it's costly, so
Yeah.
it's easier
Of
for Bill and I. So, and also to add, I'm actually a newlywed. I got married
Oh, okay.
3 years ago. I had lost my
Oh,
husband of
well,
28
congratulations.
years. He passed away from COVID. And
Oh, I'm sorry.
within that same year, my husband was always there. He was at my church and we knew each other and we got
Yeah.
married. We got married in October
Hmm.
and it's been fabulous and
Oh, congratulations.
been
That's so great.
quite a ride.
Yeah, it sounds like quite a ride. That's amazing.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So do you think that how was his growing up? Has he talked about his adopted family at all with you?
Well, first of all, he didn't find out he was adopted till he was 13, which
Okay.
is a
Mm.
big no-no.
Yeah.
That was the first thing. And my son, Jason, knew of the story because he relayed it to me. I never heard it from Sean, but I heard it from Jason. Because when I sent all those pictures over the years,
Yeah.
when he and Jason finally connected, when Sean was in his 20s, he laid out, all the pictures and all the cards and letters that I had written,
Mhm.
never mentioned my name. Even my son Jason never. I mean, we all knew, everybody
Yeah.
knew it came from me, but I was
Yeah.
like the elephant in the living room. There was no mention
Yeah.
about me at all. But he did have a rough life, and then of course his parents divorcing. His mom passed away about 8 years ago. She had a brain tumor. So
Oh,
he's lost his mom. And then I find out, because I observed on New Year's Eve, because we all got together at my son Jason's house, and I saw how Sean talks to his 15-year-old son.
mhm.
It's not good. It's not good. And it
Yeah.
really bothers all of us the way he talks to him, And so when he left that evening, Jason said to me, he said, that's the one thing that we can't stand is how he talks to his son.
Mhm.
And the poor kid, he's in the middle of a situation where his mother basically handed him over to his dad,
Yeah.
Sean. His mother lived in Mississippi. So now his name is Titan. So Titan now lives with his dad. And I can tell when I see this interaction that Titan's trying so hard to please his father, and Sean is just, he's not reacting the way that I'm sure Sean would like him to.
Yeah.
And it breaks my heart, you know.
Yeah.
I don't like to see that, and it makes me, I know that nothing is an accident,
Yeah.
God he doesn't make mistakes.
No, he doesn't.
And so I know for whatever reason, like Sean used to drink and he used to smoke, and he does not do that. He's been sober now for a couple of years and
Mhm.
goes to AA, him and his wife. His wife is a recovering alcoholic. So
Okay.
they both go to AA. She attends church. He every once in a while, but I know God has a plan and a purpose, and I am not going to beat myself up over the
No.
fact that things could have been different. I mean, things weren't ideal for my three boys that I ended up
Yeah.
raising alone, and then ended up getting married. And it's just another whole story. But, you know, things happen and you can't control it all the time. And you just have to either accept it. I am not beating myself up over,
No.
my boys are good.
Yeah.
They are good sons, good fathers, good husbands. And
Yeah.
I'm so proud of them.
Yeah.
So,
Well, see, in
yeah.
that circumstance, because you had the three already, if you would have kept him, would you have been able to still stay in school and all of those different things that it would have, you know?
I think I could have. I think
Okay.
I could have. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it would have been hard. I mean, I had two kids, almost like twins. I mean, they were still in diapers at the same time.
Yeah.
And Jason now my kids are 47, 41, and 39, and they're all soon to have a birthday here pretty soon. So their
Mhm.
ages are like a year and a half. And I mean, I remember the final decision for me when it came to really sealing my adoption plan was the day that Jason and Tim, both babies, both crying at the same time, both demanding,
Your
something of
attention.
me. And then I added another child into the into
Yeah.
that picture. And I was like, I don't think I can do this.
Yeah.
I mean, it just sealed it really for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so,
Because you were doing
yeah,
it all on your own.
yeah,
So
yeah.
then
Single
that's,
mom at the
It's
time.
so
Yeah,
hard.
I raised my boys for about 7 years without a father. And, I'm just so grateful that they're the men that they are. I mean, they've had their issues, but, they're all just, they're great,
yeah.
great men of God.
Yeah. Which is a good
And
thing too,
I'm
because
so proud of them.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good thing.
So,
So it sounds like then you said that you wrote somewhat of a book. So okay, I'm gonna change gears for a minute because of this, you placing and stuff, you became a social worker.
actually, my desire to be a social worker was before all of
Okay.
this.
Okay.
And I was supposed to have started in the fall, but like I said, I found out I was pregnant, and I applied for a grant, so they went ahead and applied it for spring semester.
Okay.
So,
So
uh,
that's what you went into right off the bat, anyways.
well, and my background, if I had time to share it all, but I was in a domestic violence situation. I was married to a couple of alcoholics. I've had a history of bad relationships,
Okay.
and you know, I I it was a healing process for me to go to college.
Okay.
It was very
Mhm.
cathartic. I
Yeah.
learned a lot about myself through that whole
Yeah.
process. I was not young when I went in, so when I graduated, I was 33,
Mhm.
and I was full time. So, and I met my husband, who he was. We dated for 3 years. The one that passed away. So we were married for 28 years, and
Yeah.
then he passed during COVID.
Yeah.
So, um, but I wanted school at that time. I really wanted to finish. I didn't want any distractions. I wanted to have that time with my kids as well.
Yeah.
We did not live together. I mean, we tried to, have you know, somewhat decent relationship, especially for the sake of my children. I did not want to have a man living in our house. I just
Yeah.
didn't want to do that. And I wanted to make things better for them. So,
Yeah.
did the best I could and
Yeah. Yeah.
got married and stayed married for 28 years.
That's pretty good.
It's
That's
very good.
that's really good.
Yeah. It is.
So then when did you change your degree over into adoption, the field of adoption?
Well, it happened to me.
Uh,
I got my degree in social work.
Yeah.
So when I got out that first year, I was working for the aged disabled through the Texas Health and Human Services, and they didn't call it DADS back then, and then I know later they changed it to DADS, and now they don't have that name anymore, but it was a community care for the aged and disabled. So I did that for a year, and I would go out to elderly people's homes and do assessments to see if they qualified for home assistance or home health or whatever
Yeah.
in Texas. So, but I realized I was 34 years old, and at that time, I really didn't have uh, it sounds selfish, but I didn't have a strong compassion for the elderly. I do
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
I actually was a hospice chaplain for about five and a
Oh,
half years.
okay.
Just not too long ago, COVID caused that to end as well. But I
Yeah.
really enjoyed that. But what happened was when I decided I don't want to stay doing this in my first year, I heard about an opening at an adoption agency, which happened to be the agency that my sister went through when she
Oh,
placed
when she
her
was
daughter 13 years before or 14
okay.
years before. So I didn't have a master's degree, I just had my bachelor's. I
Yeah.
go there for the interview, and I happened to tell my future boss that I was a birth mom.
Yes.
And I'll never forget, she puts her paperwork on the table and puts her hand on her lap,
Mhm.
and she says, "You know, you can't learn about adoption in college."
No,
She
you
said,
Oh,
"You have something that none of us here have, and that is that you went through it, and you
yeah.
have the empathy." And she hired me for that reason because I was a birth mom.
I'm sure she jumped on it because that's what I was thinking is that
yeah.
Yeah,
we, if we have a couple birth moms that have worked with us too. And so, and Alyssa, she's adopted. So I've adopted 4 children myself.
awesome.
Um, so it is something that it's hard to teach,
Yeah.
and so if someone has personal experience,
That definitely
yes,
goes a long way.
it does. It totally does. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We had a
Because
lot of while I was there for 5.5 years, and, while I was there, we had numerous workshops. We did a lot of education to the community. We had lawyers and doctors and, different health professionals and stuff come,
yeah.
and we'd serve them lunch and just make a day of
Yes.
training.
Yeah.
And that's where my heart is still.
Uh-huh.
And, I really think education, adoption still to me is so misunderstood.
Yes.
I think everyone says adoption, adoption, but there's details, there's things that people don't realize. I met the other day with somebody who and it was perfectly innocent, but she was using words like, giving the child away or, and
Mhm.
I corrected her.
Yeah. The
Oh, is
giving
that how
up.
is that how you say it? Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing is I think that a lot of people the grammar of how they act like, oh, they're not your real child. I hate that.
Yeah, me
Oh,
When
too.
people
that's
say they're not
just
your real child, I'm like, do you mean biological? I'm like,
Yeah,
they're a
yeah.
real child.
Well, and it really is out of ignorance. I
It
mean, they
is.
they
It
don't
totally is.
know, and so when you educate,
Yep.
then there's no excuse.
Yeah. Yeah.
You when
definitely.
you know something, then you're more empowered to
Yeah.
use the right words. We
Yes.
were working here in this area, Central Texas, to me and a friend of mine who I'm on the board now for Texas Alliance for Life, which is a
Okay.
big, they're movers and shakers in Central Texas, well, all of Texas actually. And
Okay.
I'm so excited that I'm on the board.
Yeah.
But before I ever became on the board, I was a volunteer and friends with the director. And we were discussing doing like an empowerment conference on adoption and
Okay.
just really go through, the ins and outs of
Yeah.
from the different triad perspectives,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think adoptees too, one of the things I'm finding out when I go to my seasoned birth moms page, there's so many hurt adoptees, and back when I was back when I was working and I heard amazing testimonies of from adoptees who had a positive experience with adoption.
Yes. Yeah.
And it was really, it's how it's handled and how it's handled from day one.
Yeah.
It's not late. It's not like, oh, I'm going to sit down with you when you're 7 or 8 and I'm going to tell you that you're adopted.
Yeah.
That's
No.
not it. And poor Sean, he was 13.
Yeah.
That's
Um,
tough.
it was too late. It was
Well,
too late.
and yeah, and I think that comes down to also education with the adoptive families, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
and two, with adoption, if it's a older child being adopted from foster care, that's a
Yeah.
whole nother spectrum of
Yeah.
area. I think that everybody just lumps adoption into one thing, and it's not.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, it's
like
so diverse
so many variables that go into it.
yeah. I mean, it's crazy.
And how
it's
old are you, Alyssa?
I just turned 30.
Oh, good for you. You're a great advocate.
yeah.
I
Oh, thank
can
you. I
tell.
do try to be.
And see, that's what's needed. And see, my vision was to have a conference that included the triad, and had
Yeah.
those different perspectives, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But just
Yeah.
so people can understand, people want to throw out that word and they don't really know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm all for adoption. I think
Mhm.
I will always advocate. When I go and talk to different PRCs, it's amazing. The pregnancy resource centers, they're fearful of talking about adoption. And
Well,
for the life of me, I cannot figure that out.
huh.
I cannot figure it out.
Yeah.
Somebody either had a bad experience with it, a staff or a volunteer,
Mhm.
or they don't want to say anything or lay it all out there, you know, parenting versus abortion versus adoption, and
Yeah.
educate in all those areas. Instead, they
Yeah.
wait for the birth mom to come in. She already has an idea of what she wants to do, and they don't bother trying to talk
Trying
to
to
her
give them
about the
any other
other.
so she knows that she has options. It's not just one thing that you can do.
Mhm.
You do have options to, that you could something else you
Yeah,
could.
I mean, how would I used to work for CPS. I was an investigator, okay?
Okay.
And I saw the other side of the spectrum where
Yeah.
you've got these children being abused
Yeah.
by either a father, mother, or both, grandparent. But what if somebody had talked to that birth mom,
Yeah.
way back then
Yeah.
and just gave a little bit of information about
Yeah.
adoption, I
Yeah.
mean, it just broke my heart to
Well,
to see that.
I think that the problem too is now we have a society where people think that at all costs the baby should stay with the biological family,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's at the cost of the child's life, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
their sanity. Everybody always wants to say adoption's the worst thing, but sometimes being in those families are just as bad,
That's
or
right.
worse. So
Yeah.
there's just such, like she said, there's just variations, and
Yeah.
we're all people, and therefore no situation is going to be the same, right?
Mhm.
That's right.
And what
Yeah.
works out for someone and what doesn't.
Are you guys
So,
familiar with My Baby and Me, the
my,
workbooks?
no.
It's a series of workbooks. I'm gonna have to do some research. A friend of mine who does work at a PRC says she still uses them, but I don't see them online. I don't see them. I don't know. Maybe she orders them, through the
Yeah.
mail. But they were powerful tools in working with birth moms and
Okay.
to help them understand, okay, so you say you want a parent. So, let's look at this for a while. And then you
Yeah.
talk about budgets
Yeah.
and, it's like very eye-opening,
Yeah. Yeah. All of it. Yeah. I mean, it's not
and so
cheap. It's
No,
not
yeah,
it's
cheap,
not.
no,
especially not
and
nowadays.
no, and food stamps definitely doesn't buy diapers
No, no, it doesn't. No.
or clothes for that
Yeah.
matter.
No, it doesn't.
So, yeah, it's a really good resource, and it had like, oh my gosh, they weren't very thick, but there were like different topics that you would,
Okay.
I would meet with birth moms, and that would be like our session
Yeah.
together, is go through the
That's really
workbook. And
cool.
Yeah. That would
so,
be great.
yeah, I'm gonna have to do some diligent
Yeah.
searching.
And see, yeah, I had my daughter write it down. I
Yeah, we
had
might
her.
have to check into
My
Yeah.
that
baby and
next.
me. Yeah,
Okay. Yep. We got
yeah,
that down so we can look and
that's
see.
cool. That's cool. Well, I'm glad you stumbled across me and vice
I
versa.
am
Yeah, this is
I'm
so
so glad.
great.
What
Yeah.
I do on my adoption awareness page is
Uh-huh.
when I first started it, I was selfishly wanting birth moms to come
Mhm.
on and
Yeah.
interact with them. And then I thought, as I was looking at the different resources that are out there, I thought, it ended up becoming more like a clearinghouse for
Yeah.
people either wanting to adopt or,
Yeah.
whatever issues the triad
Yeah.
may have. I
Yeah.
put it out. All I do is I put stuff out there that's
Yeah.
already there. So, when you guys have stuff on your website or whatever, I just share
Oh,
it
oh,
to my
that's
page.
nice.
Great. That is so
That is,
cool.
that's awesome.
So
Yeah, thank
I
you.
haven't reached
Appreciate
1,000 yet. It's really
it.
kind of funny. At first, I was limiting it who I was inviting in to
Yeah.
come and to the page.
Yeah.
And then it got to the point where I was like, somebody knows somebody who's been
Yes.
adopted, or somebody knows
Yeah.
somebody who
Yeah.
wants to adopt,
Yeah. Yeah.
or who's been a birth mom,
Yeah.
so that page is for anybody.
Yeah. And see,
So,
and that's good.
That is
I,
so
you know,
great.
another thing I was thinking is right now with adoption, a lot of people are saying it's human trafficking. So that's another problem that,
yeah,
or that we're stealing people's babies because we do newborn infant adoptions mostly at our agency. So I
yeah,
work with the birth moms that come to us pregnant.
yeah.
And I'm like, you guys must not know what human trafficking really is.
Yeah, that's not
Really
They
even
is.
don't, they
Or
don't.
the same
Well,
thing.
in
and that we
1990,
legally can't take someone's baby, from them to do this.
no, but it's ignorance.
Yeah, it is.
Again, it really is. In 1994 through 90, well, almost 2000, when I worked at the first agency that I was at, we were doing baby domestic
Yeah.
adoptions. So I was in hundreds of deliveries with women. And
Yeah.
I mean, when I would come into the hospital, I know that they thought, I'm going to walk out with this baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I started doing training to the nurses and the doctors in the hospital.
Well, and that's ultimately that needs to happen too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember one nurse came up to me after I was finished and she says, "What if I don't agree with adoption?" And I
Dude, yeah,
said, "It's
you
not
come
your
up with that.
business."
Yeah.
I said, "Whether you
That's
agree or not, you're there to minister to the physical needs of
yeah.
this woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes one negative comment to make a
Totally.
woman change her mind."
It does.
And so if I was to give any advice, I would strongly recommend that when a birth mother if she feels adoption is her plan, she
Mhm.
needs to be, she needs to have a good network of people in her life
Yes.
that are positive and supportive of her
Yeah.
decision,
Yeah.
because it doesn't take very much to make them,
No, because it's a hard thing to go
they're
through.
already thinking it.
Yes. Yeah.
They're
And
already
having
thinking,
to
I'm a terrible person. How
And
could
then
I
while
carry this
being
baby for
pregnant at the
nine
same
months?
time
yeah.
with all those hormones and
Well,
emotions, it's
with
Yeah.
my third child, we were able to be in the room with him and when he was delivered. And the nurse that nurse was after his birth and stuff. I stayed in the room and took care of him with his birth mom.
Uh-huh.
And the nurse was horrible to me because she
Wow.
didn't agree with it. And his birth mom didn't want to hold him. And as soon as I left the room, she put him in her arms and she's like, the nurse came in and gave him to me. And so she had him just laying between her legs because she didn't want to hold him. And
Oh.
then I asked
But
for
that
a
was her
low,
choice, right? She
yeah,
didn't want to hold him. Yeah.
I asked for a low iron formula and she's like, I go, is that bad? Because my other two, my girls were sick. They couldn't handle the iron. And so the lady's like, yeah, that's fine if you don't want your child to have a brain. That's the kind of comments I got,
Oh
from the
my
nurse because she
gosh.
didn't like that the birth mom was placing the child. I mean, you don't know the circumstance that that woman's going through or
That's
living
right.
life.
And you know
Yeah.
what? I've had doctors give the birth moms that we were working with a name of a family,
Yeah.
not even understanding that she already selected
Yeah, she has
somebody,
has a plan.
but they're giving, that is totally unethical.
so
Yeah, it
crazy.
is.
Totally unethical.
Yeah.
And I think one time I reported a doctor for doing that. And
Yeah.
I also reported another agency because I had girls coming that would report to me that the previous agency wanted all their money back that
Oh,
they had, like, for apartments or gas or whatever, that they were
uh-huh.
helping. Totally, totally
You can't do that.
against minimum standards.
Yes.
Totally.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And, I couldn't believe what I was
Yeah.
hearing, that
Yeah.
there are agencies that do that.
I was going to say, Alyssa actually was born in Texas in 94.
Really?
Yeah.
Yep.
Kayleen.
Wow.
Yep.
It
She came
What
was.
up
part of
with
Texas?
I think
Kayleen,
Kayleen or
Texas. Is that?
something like that.
Colleen?
Colleen.
Colleen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's 30 minutes away from me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Where she-
near we used to be Fort Hood, now it's Fort Cavazos, but
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
it's a military base over there.
Yeah. Yeah. She, her
That's
birth mom,
cool.
though, when she was born, was either given the option to place her or to have the state take her.
Wow.
So,
She had
yes.
both options were
Yeah. Yeah.
obviously
Either way.
not the parent.
Yeah. So she, wanted to have some kind of option, as
Yeah.
far as having her go to a family instead of being in foster.
Sure, no, that was
So,
the
and then
best
we were,
decision.
we were grateful because then 10 and a half months later, we got her biological sister.
Yep.
That is so cool.
Yeah,
That is so
so
It's
cool.
fun.
so with the first one, she was closed, but then the second one, she was more open, the birth mom.
Yeah, yeah.
The agency went out of business, and I don't know, when you said that you track people down, I'm wondering. They
Well,
would
what
like
we
to get
what
pictures.
we would do is they had to have been people that placed through the agency that I
That you
worked
work
at.
with.
Yeah. Yeah. This was a children's home in El Paso, and they're still there, and they have a little adoption unit, which is what I was a part of.
Yeah.
And they created that unit or division, whatever you want to call it, because the name of the agency was called Lee and Beulah Moore uh, Children's Home. So Lee and Beulah adopted a daughter, and so their heart was, there for adoption. So when they created this, it's an amazing campus. They've got cottages on the campus, but those are for kids that it's usually a parent voluntarily placing their child in the cottage, not for adoption, but for temporary, shelter or some help if they need it. But CPS would never get involved. But then later on, I think they ended up getting a contract or a partial contract with CPS. But the adoption part of it was purely private, and our fees were just ridiculously low compared to the rest of the state.
Well, I'm sure. Well, I mean, with the girls, so Texas was interesting because they would require us to keep them in foster care for 4 weeks.
Oh,
So,
wow.
even though they were infant adoptions,
Yeah,
they had to be
that's interesting.
so they could collect money from the state. So they got money from us and from the state for fostering.
Wow.
And so,
That's
which
crazy.
was okay because by the time I got both of them, they were preemies, and so they were both around 8 pounds by the
Yeah,
time that we got to take them home. But
that's good.
yeah, they were
Yeah.
still teeny baby. I mean, normal sized child, which is
Yeah.
she was so teeny. I remember she was only like 16 inches when she was. I mean, just so small. Even when she
Yeah.
came to us, she was 8 pounds. But I remember how teeny she was for the longest, and she's still teeny. So
Yeah. I'm still really little.
she's the fun size candy bar is what
Mhm.
Yeah.
they call it.
Under 5 feet?
I'm just right at 5 feet.
Are you really?
Yeah.
Wow. I'm 5'3", so I never
Yeah.
thought of myself as small, but
Yeah,
my mother was small. She was smaller than me.
well, my husband's mom, she's under 5 feet. She's like
Is she?
4'9". Yeah,
Yeah,
she's
she's
Yeah.
so
little.
teeny. Yeah, she's teeny. So, well, and then our family, we didn't care. We didn't ask what the height, their weight, it didn't matter to us.
Yeah.
Because we ranged from small to over 6 feet. So I'm like, doesn't matter where you're at, you're gonna fit in.
Yeah.
We're good. It doesn't matter how
Yeah,
tall.
it's all
That's funny.
So I mean, I know
Yeah.
you can do all that, but well, it sounds like
Well,
you've done amazing things, and so I mean,
now I'm retired,
yeah.
but I'm not really retired.
No, it doesn't sound
Yeah.
like it.
No. Well, in
Or
addition to being on the board, I'm also a chaplain, and I've been a chaplain since what, 2014.
Okay.
And I did hospice for 5.5 years, which I never thought I would do, but I would literally be at the deathbed of so many patients, and had the privilege of leading a lot of them to the Lord, which was
Yeah.
pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But it was not something that I would ever have thought that I could do.
Yeah.
But now I'm not doing hospice anymore, but because of my involvement with, the board and pro-life issues, I mean, I call myself a chaplain, but I don't have a specialty in one certain area.
Yeah.
But if I guarantee you, if I walk into a Walmart and I'm wearing a chaplain hat and a chaplain badge and my shirt says chaplain on it, I guarantee you somebody's going to stop me and they're going to want prayer. And that's what I love about,
Oh,
about being a
Oh,
chaplain.
that's
great.
awesome though.
It
Yeah.
because it opens the door,
Yeah.
it really does open a
Sure.
door
Yeah.
because not everyone's going to stop you in a Walmart. Would you
No.
pray for me?
Yeah, no. I never thought about that, but
Yeah.
it's amazing that people will come up and stop you, even with you having that on, that they're
Because
like,
they
"Oh,
see
he's
that,
batting
it's
now."
funny, people know what a chaplain is,
Yes.
and a lot of times years ago, and maybe it still happens, but for a lot of people, they would affiliate chaplain with being a military position,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that's not true anymore. I mean, our organization is called Soldiers of Christ, SOC, and we will certify chaplains all over the country. I mean, we have California, Colorado. We don't have any in Utah.
Yeah.
We do have a lot of Texas ones and Arizona, North Carolina. So it's slowly growing. We're
Sure.
only a couple of years old, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, that's amazing. So
it's a lot of fun.
the board that you're on, what is that about?
Texas Alliance for
Yeah.
Life. And there's actually a website you can go to.
Yeah, I have to write that down, but
Joe Poyman is the director, and he actually started it.
Mhm.
We joke about this. He started it 37 years ago. I said, I was probably pregnant when you started. I was thinking of adoption and focusing on that, and
Yeah.
here you are. But he's got
Exactly.
a thriving, it's a great organization. And what they do is they do a lot of work with legislature
Okay.
and with the Governor Abbott for Texas,
Okay.
a lot of lobbying. I mean, there's 20 board members right now on the board, and I just feel so privileged to be a part of
Down there. Yeah. I mean,
it.
yeah, there's a
And
lot.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say there's a lot of stuff going on in legislation that um we're not overly thrilled about.
Yeah.
That the agencies are having a hard time with and trying to figure out how to make the voices heard because they don't want birth moms to travel. And they say
Yeah.
that birth moms can't contact agencies out of their state. They can only contact and that yeah,
Really? And
yeah.
that's Utah's law?
No, that's what they want to pass
So
for everyone.
everyone? Oh my gosh.
And that they say that birth moms don't call around to find an agency that fits, that they just take the first one. I'm like, you guys know nothing about what
See
you're
why there
talking
needs to
about.
be more education?
Right?
Exactly.
I mean, you have all these
So
people making
important.
decisions that don't know anything about it. And
You know
so,
what I think? I don't know, I'm guessing, but what the way it is right now, like in Texas, you cannot have an abortion in Texas, but you can have one in New Mexico or
yeah,
Oklahoma, which is right next to us. And so,
yes,
I know Planned Parenthood was busing women over to do
yep.
that, and so I don't understand the logic behind uh wanting to have a law that you cannot take women unless it's I don't know. It just
Well,
doesn't make
it's a
sense to me.
law that the birth mom can't, if she's pregnant, can't go to another state's place.
Yeah.
So they're taking her right away of choosing, what agency she wants to work with, or, I
But
mean,
yet it's okay to take a birth mom to another
yes,
state to have an abortion.
that's okay.
Yeah, so
That doesn't make any sense.
No, some of
Do you
them
have any
don't.
lobbyists? Well, we're talking about federal, so this is bigger than,
Yeah.
oh man, I need to talk to our
So, yeah,
local.
so, because talking to you and seeing what you're involved in, it's kind of perfect because we're trying to figure stuff out and you're on a board
Yeah,
that does some of that stuff. And so maybe you can find out more information for us too.
I
So,
will.
Kathy is the founder of this agency. She's my mother.
Oh, wow.
So
Mhm.
she's adopted 8 out of 10. So there's 10 of us.
Wow.
But
Wow.
so we're trying to get stuff together. So I'm going to talk to her about you and see,
Okay.
you know, so you're going to hear from me again. I'm just like,
Yeah.
And that's okay.
oh,
What's your mom's last name?
Kunkel,
How do you spell that?
Kunkel.
Uncle. Okay.
Kathy Kunkel. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
That's
yeah,
cool.
you can go on our, she's on the website.
How long have you guys been around?
We've been open since what, 30 years? Over
Yeah,
30 years
30
now.
years.
30?
Yeah.
Wow. That's really
Yeah.
good.
That's a
I've
20.
lot.
always wanted to go back to working in adoption. I did foster care and adoption after I left that first agency after 5.5 years. And then I stayed home and was a PTO mom. And I had 2 kids left at home that were going to graduate soon. And since my husband was doing so well, I really didn't have to work and I
Yeah.
wanted to be home for my
Yeah.
kids. So then when I tried to go back to work, I couldn't find any openings in
Yeah.
adoption. So I ended up going into foster care and then it ended up becoming foster care and adoption. So
Okay.
I worked at Bear Foundation, Lutheran Social Services.
Mhm.
I started adoption program at Lutheran El Paso and then a World for Children. I started, which is what brought me to Central Texas because
Yeah.
the position was I was called up one day and asked to take a director's position. And so
Yeah.
I did. And then after I was there, we started talking more about adoption. And so they moved me out of that position. And I was kind of like the, the person, really. I was the only person that was handling. A World for Children has like 9 or 10 branches all over
Oh, wow.
Texas.
Yeah.
So I would go to every single one. And back then, that was,
Mhm.
well, it was 2007. But I would educate. That was the first thing, was
Yeah.
educate the staff,
Yeah.
and I did a lot of adoptions with families through CPS. They came to us, but the kids were contracted to come into our foster program through CPS, but they were legally free. So
Oh,
it was really a lot of fun. I
yeah.
really, really enjoyed.
Yeah.
I enjoyed doing that,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I'm
So
having.
you're gonna get some. I'm sure I'm gonna give her your name and stuff.
Well,
So
let me tell you, if you go to Texas Alliance for Life, just spell out the whole word
Mhm.
.org,
Uh,
there's a legislature page that it
okay.
kind of gives you updates on what's going on in Texas.
Yeah.
And so maybe, there's
Okay.
something there. And also, Joe Poyman, his name looks like Pajman, but it's pronounced Poyman.
Okay.
It's Czechoslovakian. But anyway, he's the director and he is so open to, I mean, I'm sure if your mom
Okay.
wanted to
Okay.
talk to him,
Yeah.
you tell her to tell him that
Okay. She
Jerianne
gave us
Gabler said,
permission. She said
yeah.
that we should reach out.
Well, and I'll talk to him too and let
Okay.
him know ahead of time. But
Yeah.
he loves, he started this on his own. He's got
Yeah.
a PhD now and he works so much with, I mean, there's 250 plus um, pregnancy resource centers in Texas.
Yeah.
He works with every single one of them
Yeah.
just about. I mean, he'll go to any, if they have a banquet or fundraiser of some kind, he tries to be there. Or as board members, he also wants us to, he
Yeah.
doesn't try to
Yeah.
do it all himself.
Yeah.
But like I've been to a handful of fundraisers and I've only been on the board since May. So
Okay.
it'll be a year pretty soon. But
Yeah.
that's part of the thing of us, is being a support to the
Yeah.
agencies around.
Yeah.
Which is
And
great.
so it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think we got to wrap it up, but I appreciate you coming on and sharing your
Thanks,
story,
Heidi.
all your information. I've got notes over here, so
Yeah.
Now let me ask you, how would this be seen? Would you like put it out later on
okay.
or
So yeah, so YouTube is where it's going to be seen first.
oh, okay.
So and that will probably just take like a week or two, and it'll be on YouTube. And then
Okay.
on the podcast channels, it's going to be more like a month out. So,
Cool.
but
Am I the first person to do a Zoom call with? Because I
no,
know, okay, that's good.
yeah, no,
I
no,
noticed you
you're
had a
fine.
lot of people in the
Yeah,
studio.
Yeah, no, we do quite a few Zoom calls.
Yeah.
That's
So,
good.
yeah.
That's
So
good.
you're not the first.
Well, it's a pleasure to meet you
Well, it's a
both,
pleasure to meet you too.
Alyssa.
Yeah, it was
Good to
so
meet you
great talking.
too.
You
Yeah.
can come back anytime.
Yes.
Oh, I'm here.
We might have you come back.
All right. Hey, I could
She's just
even
gonna-
fly to Utah
Yeah,
sometime.
that would be
That would
great.
be so great.
I'm gonna just have Alyssa close us out and then
Okay.
we'll let you go.
All righty.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Jerianne, and for all the amazing work you do. It's just been so
Thank
incredible
you.
to hear your story and anxious to see like what else you got going on. So keep going, doing what you're doing.
You never know.
That.
Yeah.
And if any of you guys have any questions about adoption or want to learn more, you can visit our website at www.activeloveadoptions.com.
Thank you.
All right.
Have
Thank
a
you
good
guys. God
day.
bless.
Appreciate it. See
All
ya.
righty. Take care.
Yep.
Bye-bye.